Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, December 2nd Finance Committee meeting. And we will begin. My name is Daniel Schultz, and I am, I guess, sole chair of this committee for a very small amount of time. What would the power go tonight? Let's begin with a roll call, starting with your Epps.
Zachary Epps, present.
Mia Blitzstein, present.
Ross Whiting, present.
Leah Mulhern, present.
Charles Burdell Williams, present.
Robin Murphy, present.
Caroline Lunds, present. Jennifer Murray, present.
And Dan Schultz. Mr. Snyder. Oh, is there a motion to approve the minutes from last?
So
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's agenda, we will look at the interim financial statements for the school district with December 2nd and this board meeting occurring on the same day. Being so close to November 30th, we did our best to close the books to try and get these statements together. We reserve the right to make one or two minor mistakes. Also, tonight we'll look at an update of the state budget and how it impacts the school district that was approved between this meeting and last, as you recall, several months late. We'll also take a look at the food service RFP process. So the administration is recommending that we revisit our food service contract. So we'll take a look at how that process works and what we're currently doing, what board action will be required for that to happen. And then board action items for next week. We have the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology budget approval. We have the Act 1, aka the opt-out resolution, where the board will consider whether it will increase taxes greater than the Act 1 index or not. And we will have the bid approval for the Cedar Brook Glenside addition that we briefly discussed at the facilities meeting, as well as some other smaller contracts, construction material testing, and track equipment. So start off with our balance sheet as we look at every month. We just take a quick glance at our total assets, our total liabilities, and our revenue over expenditures that have come in to date. So through the end of November, I particularly focus on cash because on an interim period balance sheet, we're not really adjusting all of our receivables and payables. We're really just more of a cash-oriented reporting. So year over year, our cash is virtually the same. If you recall from last meeting, we started moving some cash that was owed to the cap reserve fund that was sitting in the general fund back into the cap reserve fund. So you can see, I lost my pointer. You can see down here, this is our interfund payable. This is what money that was due to the cap reserve fund. We started to move that over. So this flat level of cash, if we didn't move that money, we would have approximately $3 million more, which year over year is a good sign that we have strong cash flow and our operations are fairly stable. On the next page, we'll look at our revenue and expenditures. So year over year through November of 2025 to date, we have collected $112 million in local, state, and federal revenues. Last year at this time to date, we collected $115 million. You see there's quite a large number, a reduction in federal monies collected. We were owed a lot of residual COVID monies, COVID dollars, and that came in at the beginning of last year and eventually was journal entry against our receivable accounts. At this point in time, only having $9,500 received from the federal government passed through the state of Pennsylvania is extraordinarily low. Because of the late passage of the budget, there is some delay in cash flow, not only on our federal money, our title monies, but also some of our state money has not come in as quickly as it typically does. On the next two slides later, we'll take a closer look at our local revenues and how they stack up year over year. On the expenditure side, we are running $2.9 million higher year over year expenditures. The largest increase is here in operations and maintenance. If you recall, again, we charged the high school roof project, which is funded by a grant. Currently, it's sitting in the general fund where the grant was applied for. So that is a non-recurring expense that we will eventually receive reimbursement for to the tune of $1.1 million. Up here on the instructional side, in our regular programs and our special ed programs, this primarily makes up salary increases and benefit increases, which is 70% of our budget. So this is in line with where we would expect to be at this point in time in a given year. On the special ed side, we are also slightly ahead in the payment of our charter schools, our charter school tuitions. When the state approved its budget and gave us a dump of a lot of our money, from that money was withheld a lot of charter school tuition payments that weren't paid. So a common theme amongst public school districts was to withhold charter school tuitions until we got funded from the state. And when that happened, it all kind of coalesced at the same time. All right, any questions on revenue collections or expenditures today?
When do we have an anticipated time that the budget from the state, at least the federal funding, will be delivered?
So some of it has started to trickle in already in December.
Okay.
I don't know. Probably sometime this month they'll start to catch up. But I think just because of the delay of processing everything, the state budget was approved mid-November and we had the holiday, so I would guess that held up a lot of processing at the state level.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other board questions? I do not. Oh,
Yes,
Mr. Epstein.
Just curiosity, I know we were talking about, this gets down to employee benefits. I'll talk about that. Previously, we were talking about hopefully recognizing some savings around prescriptions and things like that. And so do we have any, obviously there was some variance from last year to this year, but do we have any sort of data around what's happening there?
I got a slide in the.
Look at that. Look, never mind. You anticipate everything. I'll wait. I really didn't look at this ahead of the meeting. Right?
Any other board questions before we, I see no members of the public are joined.
All right, so presenting this is our graphical representation of our structural balance. Obviously, at the end of the year, we're trying to maintain a blue line slightly above that red line as we approach our budget of $140 million. All right, digging down on the local revenue, we continue to see a trend of real estate taxes being greater than last year. This 1.9% is slightly under what our tax increase was, but our real estate tax collection period, as you know, runs to the end of December. So we still have another month of collections until that expires, and we would expect to see the totality of our real estate tax revenue for the year over year, and get a really good idea of what those results were. Our earned income tax collections continue to show strength. They're 2.4% greater than the prior year. Our real estate transfer taxes surprisingly continue to outpace prior years. We still have a strong housing market. We still have a lot of houses selling, flipping within the township. And our delinquent real estate taxes are being collected at a faster pace this year than last year, which is another good sign. This is all our cash flow real estate tax collection. And perhaps the most surprising and pleasantly surprising number is our earnings on investments continues to match last year's pace, which is a combination of some of our investments we put in place 2 years ago that were a little longer with higher returns, and having more cash to invest with several years of positive operating. Any questions on our
Question, but just a comment and more of a thank you. I just appreciate the management. Appreciate it. I like to see the numbers at least that are within our control. So thank you.
One question around local revenues specifically. Since we are going to have a new tax collector, are there any conversations that this doesn't need to be answered here. Just I would ask administration to reflect on any conversations you'd like to see the board have with that officer to provide guidance or advice. Obviously, you can do that as well. But I just wanted to throw out there really a transitionary period, and as community members, we know the person, so we're happy to provide feedback and advice.
Yeah, so I met Mr. Pitts last week and Mark are working the transition of that promise. With no other questions, I'll move on to the state budget update. So I know this looks a little convoluted, but really breaking this down into two sections. How does the budget that we passed compare to the budget that the state passed? And what were the differences? So looking at these first two columns, we flat estimated our basic ed subsidy and our special ed subsidy. And both of these numbers came in slightly higher than in the prior year. Where we saw significant change was in the Ready to Learn block grant. So the Ready to Learn block grant was traditionally just a grant to support academic achievements within the classroom. The Shapiro administration is running more and more money through this office. And you can see we did not budget for an additional 1.1 million that was allocated to the base foundational Ready to Learn block grant. So that was quite a surprise. And on top of that, there's an additional $1.1 million that was approved, but that was designated towards the following year. So it's not, I didn't include it in this number here since it's not usable until the 26, 27 school year.
That's what we're doing.
And what does that grant allow for?
So the purpose, the basic core of the foundation grant, we use to provide additional kindergarten supports, kindergarten aids. The additional 1.1 million that was added this past year, the 340 was the base grant. The additional 1.1 million came with specific criteria. You could use it to pay off debt. You could use it to offset tax increases, which is what the board essentially opted to do, was to use it to offset tax increases and build it into its budget.
Perhaps I was just going to follow up because the foundation's piece of the Ready to Learn grant is, you said that's designated for kindergarten, or is that open?
So last year we received $340,000 for a very long period of time, and the grant had not changed, and that was the purpose of the grant. So this year they added $1.1 million to that amount. We haven't had guidance on how that particular piece has to be spent. My assumption is it will match what the requirements were last year about offsetting tax increases, or
Which was the tax equity supplement.
yes.
So then, okay, so that's what I was trying to figure out. It seems like we will get the funds. It's just a matter of how, when, and what we can actually spend the money on. So this isn't like this isn't like an overall 1.1 million increase that we will just get next year. Or for this year.
So for this year we will. Yes.
We will.
It's a 1.1 million. It is 1.3 million more than it's confusing because they added 1.1 million to the foundation grant.
Yeah.
And they added another 1.1 million.
It just happened to be 1.1.
So they're adding the same.
But the other 1.1, we won't know yet until next year.
And not to confuse things, but we got the 1.1 last year. They approved their budget on July 9th, so we were unable to take board action. So that money is recognized for this year.
Right.
There's another 1.1.
But that's not that 1.1. That's also literally, that's why I was so confused as to what this
Could it just
1.1
be
was.
1.2?
Yeah.
So this year we will be recognizing the 1.1 million we received last year. The 1.1 million they just approved and added to our foundation.
Yeah.
And that will be this year's revenue.
For this year.
And then they also approved additional 1.1 million. We have to take board action for next year. So the idea being, you accept this money, you cannot, this is specific to tax equity school districts. You accept this money, you can't increase taxes.
Right, and that's what's going to be my next question. But now it actually works though, because now we can know that we're eligible for this next year, therefore not increase taxes. I think last year we had to increase taxes and then learn how much we were gonna get. So it looks like they fixed it a little bit.
They fixed it.
Okay, yeah,
So
a little bit.
We're required to approve our budget by.
Yeah.
We're required to approve our budget by June 30th.
Yeah.
They approve theirs on July 9th and say you can't have this money, which is, didn't make sense.
Yeah. Okay.
So
That's all.
quick question, we're receiving this money so late, right? Into the school year, we're what, a third of the way through the school year. Does this money have to be spent by the end of this school year?
I don't have 100% guidance on what that is yet. So I can't quite answer that.
Okay.
I don't have $2.5 million or an additional 1.1 million worth of kindergarten aids to fund.
Right. That's why
At least I'm not salary.
that's why, I mean, I'm sure we could find definitely other places to put this money, but
So
if there are parameters around it,
Right.
I'm just wondering if there's a deadline by which it has to be used, or we can save it, considering we didn't get the budget for the year that we're in until December.
So this is all brand new to the state, just as it's us. Since the budget was just passed a month ago, I'm sure they're creating the guidelines for it to be spent based on the legislation. And as always, we'll have an application process that we'll have to file with the state.
Sorry, this is where the school code piece comes in. Like once the budget is agreed, there's a lot of school code changes. This is what would be applied to a school code change.
I don't think it was a code change, it was just a funding.
Yeah, I'm saying because of, okay, I don't want to take too much time, but I feel like I wasn't sure because now that's what we heard. Like, okay, now that there's an approval, there's like a lot of school code changes that will happen and that will determine how the money will flow. And so I was just wondering, is that what you're looking for to give you more clarity is like those school code changes?
So based on what's in the bill, the state will have to develop a process to meet the requirements of that bill. Like last year, we had to demonstrate that we were going to use money to offset taxes. So they require school districts to draft a resolution, and certify that they would, and submit a copy of that resolution to the state as compliance. So I assume we'll have a similar process, whatever that looks like when they're all set.
I'll throw out, it may be useful for any of us, or board leadership to find if there's a good summary of what the heck happened in Harrisburg.
Oh, yeah.
Us to be aware.
The IU has one. I'm so sorry. I meant to send it around.
Okay, I would love
Yeah.
to read that, and I think that might help provide some extra content. One thing I would like to make sure I have full clarity on from this portion of that. So the Ready to Learn block grant is different from the new type of funding that required an application and that there was a 1-year lag on. Or is that correct?
Yes, the 340 required an application, a different process from the tax equity money. So the regular block grant had an application process for how we were going to spend it for educational goals. The tax equity money had a whole set of different requirements. So they're actually further in the slide deck. We will look at them quickly. And then this new Ready to Learn block grant is the foundation is the 340 plus the 1.1.
Okay.
And I don't have 100% guidance on how
Now
exactly they want us to spend that.
I understand why I don't understand. And I look forward to reading.
That's an achievement.
It is.
It's a tough homework.
In seriousness, thank you.
But there's two pieces of
Yes.
the regular block grant.
Yeah.
There's tax equity and there's the foundation.
Thank you. Any other board questions from the public? And I do see we have a fourth participant.
That's right.
Off chance.
Is that an actual participant?
So
Yeah.
if any members of the public have questions at any point, please use the raise hand feature. And
All right, so I jumped around a bit. So jumping back up to the charter school reimbursement. Year over year, last year, now we're comparing the last year's PA state budget to this year's state budget and looking at where the state decided to reallocate their money. So they put less in the basic ed subsidy. They eliminated the charter school reimbursement subsidy. This $137,000 increase is quite standard for the special education subsidy. The property tax relief, as you recall, is its own separate fund of homestead money from the gambling legislation that was enacted quite a long time ago. The school mental health grant was funded this year. However, none of the allocations have been released for any many of the school districts. And typically that is a meritorious application process, which we don't have guidance on at this point yet, hence the question mark. And we talked about the Ready to Learn block grant. So this is where the state put the bulk of their educational resources in this Ready to Learn block grant. So back up to the charter school reimbursement, there were some changes to the funding formula for how school districts fund charter schools. So we lost this charter school reimbursement, but the cyber charter tuition formula, the way it works out when I do quick math on it, is it will reduce our charter school tuition an estimated $437,000. So, about $100,000, $150,000 difference in our favor. And that's mostly the result of the vast majority of our 130-ish charter school students. They all attend cyber charter schools. So we're going to realize a lot of that savings.
I'm sorry, can you repeat why there is that savings? Because they go to cyber charters?
So the tuition we pay charter schools is in essence our budgeted expenditures divided by our number of students,
Right.
broken out between special ed and regular ed in a nutshell. So they changed that formula. It's now our estimated expenditures minus a bunch of other things, which gives us a lower budget divided by regular ed divided by special ed. So they changed that formula a little bit, eliminated this subsidy. And the resulting difference is the difference between the estimated $437,000 we'll save in tuition costs versus the $289 that we got last year.
Thank you.
So it's a good sign in that the state recognizes that there's a significant amount of reserves being held in cyber charter entities. All right, any questions on the state?
Sorry for the overload, but my understanding was that it doesn't yet cap like the special education tuition yet. Like, so these savings would be for general ed and or whether we could realize more annual savings or.
Nothing has been capped.
Okay.
It's still roughly based on how our expenditures increase minus certain things.
So
So
none of it, general ed or special ed.
both now have a different formula that is, last year they changed special ed, this year they changed regular ed. They said that the special ed, they have not released the formula in its entirety. They said that the special ed will be broken out by category and it will mirror
Type of
districts.
disability.
Correct.
Yeah, oh wow.
And for anybody listening, when we're talking about a cap, there was at some point a proposal for just limiting the amount that a cyber charter could charge at a flat amount. And that
That did not happen.
that did not happen. And that's what instead, the formula was adjusted, but there's no blunt cap to.
Correct. Regular is a little easier formula. It's your total budget expenditures minus, like now you can subtract out some of your 60% of your operational costs, 60% of your student activities costs, your regular ed cyber tuition cost. But then you have to reduce this number of students you're dividing it by the cyber regular ed students. So it's way too far in the weeds for this. The special ed is more complex because obviously depending on the need of the special ed student, there's different costs. So I think they're trying to mirror the tuition based on that, but I don't have very much guidance with that. It's like, all right, any other questions? We can talk about tax equity for another 30. All right, moving on to the food service RFP. So as you recall, the current food service management contract expires on June 30, 2027. So what it was a 5-year contract for our food service management company to maintain the same guaranteed profit to the district. But within that 5 years, we also had annual renewals that we had to complete. So this year, instead of just participating in annual renewal, our intent is to put the entire contract back out for RFP and to solicit a new company. And I outlined here some of the reasons for that. I'm actually quite surprised the state didn't intervene and tell us that we needed to, because we had some significant changes to the district that impact our food service management company. One, we restructured the grades at each building, which should have been a material change that triggered an RFP. We changed our lunch schedule, so we went to community lunch at the high school. And this was bid as a 3-lunch schedule food service management company contract. Last year, Whitson's requested a reduction in the financial guarantee, which to me triggers an RFP because they don't feel that they can meet the requirements of that guaranteed amount. And we had significant changes to our summer feeding programs over the past 3 years. So I think given all these 3 significant changes to our school lunch, on top of what I feel as a decrease in momentum from our food service management company, I think it's time to put Whitson's on notice that we're going to put this out to RFP, and if they want to win our business back, then they need a plan. After repeated warnings, they need a plan to re-earn our business. I don't know if you recall, but when they started on as our food service management company, they did things like farm to table grants where they handed out fresh fruits and vegetables to our elementary school students along with recipes and encouraged healthy eating. They also did things like pop-up meal centers at our different school buildings to try and encourage participation in the National School Lunch Program. And I feel like there've been some staffing turnover and some staffing challenges that have kind of inhibited their ability to encourage our students to participate in the lunch program. So given these substantial changes and given that a drop in momentum, I feel like it's time to reopen this contract and put it out for RFP. Before I talk about the process, any questions on that specifically?
Sorry. I just want to make sure it is 2027 and it takes an entire year to do the bid and RFP process. That's correct.
It does not. So the current contract was a 5-year contract where they maintain the same level of guaranteed profit to the district. But within that 5 years, every single year, we renew with the state our intent to continue to contract with
I
them.
see. So we're just getting,
So rather than wait that last year, we're just going to.
we're moving forward with a new, yeah, okay.
So the process will take us through the end of this year, looking at a new or the same contractor with the right proposal, beginning on July 1st of 2026.
Thank you.
So in terms of getting other bids from other companies, or providers, what does that look like beyond a bid? Like, will there be a sampling night? Like, how's that work?
So we have a handful of criteria that we ask. One is a presentation, one is a sampling with a select committee of students, board members, parents. So as much engagement as we can.
Thank you. That's what I was hoping to.
You'll talk about, we're not finished with food services.
No.
There's no slide.
We have more slides. All right, so as you know, we participate in the National School Lunch Program. So that's a heavy regulated program. The state manages that program on behalf of the federal government, so we follow a very strict RFP process. We have to fill out a lot of prescribed forms with prescribed information. That packet of information was completed and sent to the state in November. The state, in essence, takes 3 weeks or the month of December to review it, provides feedback to us, at which point we advertise and we commence with the RFP. So just outlining some of the requests that the board specifically wanted from the last RFP, it was breakfast in all buildings, which we currently have. It was a summer feeding program, which we currently have. Continued sustainability of all products used, healthier options for students over and above the National School Lunch Program, and nutrition education for our students. So these are some things that aren't 100% required for the National School Lunch Program, but that we added as part of our RFP process. So I already discussed the November-December timeline. December, January, we'll receive approval from PDE that our RFP is good to go and be advertised. In January and February, we'll be looking for school board approval to advertise and solicit proposals for our food service management company. Our suggested pre-bid walkthrough meeting is March 11th in 2026, with a bid opening on March 27th. And then in April or May, award of the bid, preferably April, given the time required to set up a summer feeding program. And this is my last food service slide.
Any questions or comments around food service RFP process? I had one question around community inputs, and particularly the student and teacher community who will be eating the food. Beyond just a taste test, do we have a sense of satisfaction of the current vendor that could give a signal of baseline, what percentage of our students and faculty would want a
So we have Whitson's conducted surveys, which I don't know how helpful they are. So we always look at participation levels, and participation levels are not headed in the right direction.
Are not headed.
Not headed in the right direction.
I'd be very interested to know what the satisfaction was. But not interested enough to suggest using a huge amount of administrative time. Dr. Watts.
What's the cost of school lunch, of the meals? And does that vary by vendor? Or is that set by the state?
We set the price. This $3.25 is lunch for secondary, $1.95, $1.95 for elementary. Or $50 for adults.
Any other comments?
All right, the next board action item is the approval of the budget for the Eastern Center for Arts and Technology. So I did just a high level overview of every district, every ascending district and their contribution to the Eastern Center this year. So our contribution last year was $1.4 million, and this year will be $1.5 million, or an 8% increase of $111,000. If you recall, there are two pieces to this. There's a capital assessment and there is an operating assessment. So as makes sense, the operating assessment is the cost of the operations of Eastern itself. And that is, and our share of that cost is primarily driven by our attendance, the number of students we're sending to Eastern. So this 8% increase mostly means we're sending more students to Eastern, and that's why we're seeing an increase in costs. The capital assessment is based on our district's real estate tax assessment value, or STEP value, and so is a measure of our ability to pay for capital items, and that has a lower increase. So adding these two together results in a $111,000 increase. And on the next slide here, I outlined the growth in our enrollment to Eastern. 23-24, we had 101 students, and now we're up to 116 students. So if there's great concern about this increase, the only way to control would be potentially limiting the number of students, the number of seats that we send to Eastern.
Two questions. One is, what does STEB stand for on the previous? Yeah.
It's the State Tax Equalization Board. It's basically our assessment, our taxable assessment.
Got it. Okay.
$3.5 billion of taxable assessment.
And my other question is really about how, like, kids apply, they visit Eastern, they apply, right? Are we the ones who decide who goes? No, Eastern decides, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Right? So in terms of like us limiting our kids, well, sorry, I'm just saying, I don't want our kids. I'm excited that more kids are going to Eastern. This is me as speaking as one board member. I am happy to see the increase in both interest and acceptance. So that's all.
Oh, I'm not encouraging that.
Oh, okay.
I'm just saying that is a concern.
Okay.
Because our ability to raise taxes, and this is the practicality of money, our ability to raise taxes is 3.5%, and we have an expenditure that's growing at 8%. So it's unsustainable. And this is just a small piece of a $140 million budget. But if we are concerned about addressing it, I'm giving
Right.
the option. We can consider trying to find a way to cap the number of students we send to Eastern. Not suggesting we do it, but
Just one thought. If we can take some of that extra money we got from the state, from the budget that we weren't expecting, and move it over here to this column. Can we just keep all the kids where they are?
I'm not suggesting we move kids out of these.
I do want to clarify just briefly, like, we have income, we have expenditures. There's not a one-to-one mapping, generally speaking, between our income and expenditures outside of when there are requirements to use these income for a given expenditure. So, and also, this is a small portion of our overall budget. So even if it is technically unsustainable at an 8% increase for one perspective, it is not. I suggest not a threat to our fiscal solvency, for example.
It's
So-
not.
Yes. So,
But
So,
a glimpse into my world. We get into
Yeah.
administrative, how much is this increasing, how much is it costing? And so what can we do to mitigate
but thank you for the context. Mr. Riddell Williams, who is, I believe, probably through his acknowledgement of Eastern students, directly responsible for the popularity.
So I figured I should, thank you.
Great.
Referencing that, I should probably say something. But the one thing that I did want to add, just in the context of this, right, is the quality of the experience that the students are getting at Eastern. So to wrap that back around to the capital assessments, the functional information of folks in the room and listening. It's a 10-year capital plan at Eastern that is producing a significant number of facility upgrades. One of which was experienced recently, which Dr. Scriven had a chance to check out, which is the new culinary facility. There's been upgrades to welding, robotics. There's been the introduction of exercise science. There was also the upgrade for protective services, automotive, so that the functional increases are related to students, but they're paying for things that are benefiting our students simultaneously. Only other like one point to add as well is I always joke with our friends in Abington about them owning the lion's share. Right, in terms of number of students who are being accepted, that is in some way proportional, not directly, but in some way proportional to the number of students who are applying, right? So the smaller districts in Eastern's catchment they have smaller number of students to offer to the programs as well. One thing that, I'll continue to add again is a little bit of a joke to our friends in Abington, but I love them dearly, that if they want to add more students without removing any opportunities for Cheltenham students, then just that. And again, just overall, if there are any other formative questions, Josh, thank you. You did a great job explaining the finite details around where the tax assessments come from and exactly how we arrive at the amount of our expenditure at Eastern. But if there are any other finite questions.
I'm sorry, I lifted these graphs right out of the operating budget of Eastern. So next year for the approval for the Eastern operating budget, you'll see these graphs repeated in that.
Mr. Epps.
Absolutely support and second, third, whatever, everything that was said about like the mission and values, why we would want to continue to send students to Eastern. But I guess I do appreciate some of the practicality of it. So I guess we are looking at probably if we do, not to say we'll have an 8% increase every year, right? But it would only take about 2 or 3 years of that before we are talking about a potential tax increase related to this specific initiative. So I guess I'm wondering at what point do we need to be mindful? Like what figure do we need to start being mindful about that? I guess it would take about 3 to 5 years of 8% increases. We're not talking about solvency, but we are talking about half percentage.
I think Dan hinted at it. We have the global budget, and when the global budget starts to feel pressure, then the board has to really hunker down on what is what is it, where it wants to spend its money and what its initiatives are. Is this an important one at the top of the list? Are there other areas in which we want to scale back?
There's other pivots we would be able to make.
Okay, great. Before
Prior-
it gets to.
Yeah, Eastern is rock solid,
Okay.
and I just don't want us, there's no need for us going down a rabbit hole
Okay.
around these. It's a solid program. Our kids are benefiting immensely. And there's other budgetary considerations that we would take in place before even looking at Eastern, from my perspective. And I would say, and it's going to be an opportunity, I don't know, I don't have it memorized, but there is going to be an opportunity for new board members to visit Eastern. So if you've not visited it, I would definitely
Yeah, that's great.
seize that opportunity. I was just there this morning for our advisory meeting. They run a tight ship. I'm surprised Mr. Bedell Williams hasn't mentioned that we have a student in the robotics. You guys probably already saw
Oh,
that.
yeah. He said video.
I got it. So, I mean, our kids are flourishing. Abington is twice our size, and you see they have 165, we have 110. And they represent about 25% of the total student population there. We're about 17%. In terms of positive placement in Cheltenham, our percentage rate is a little shy of 98% of students that are attending here. So there's data that really supports the positive impact that the program's having on students.
So if I could close it out with this, essentially, I don't want to choose between, hey, let's do this mentoring program versus Eastern versus this versus that. I actually think this becomes an advocacy moment for us. And I do think we can, like, as we get to, like, what are the 3 to 5 things that we are spending the state money on or whatever extra money on? If it's like, hey, we are sending more children to Eastern and we want to keep doing this, it's like, yes, that becomes part of our narrative. And so in some ways, like, what are those 3 to 5 things that we want to start saying, like, hey, state, federal, these are must-haves and we need more funds so that we can do more of these things.
So hold tight,
Yeah.
because there will be some initiatives coming down.
Cool, yeah, whatever they are, whatever they are.
No, it's like dual enrollment, for instance,
Yeah.
and things.
Yeah.
As we're tightening pathways, there's definitely gonna be some other areas.
Yeah.
Where additional funding, without doubt, will be.
I truly love the collective advocacy lens. That conversation. Any other board questions?
Just briefly, thank you, Dr. Scriven, for mentioning that the open house at Eastern Center is March 1st.
No, that's 3 times.
It's really worked out. It's really great. I got to see a Maserati.
Like
I
me.
think it was a Maserati. Was it a Maserati? So one of the students had a Maserati there. Yeah,
He's there work at the
March 1st?
Maserati dealership.
Maserati dealer,
March 1st is the summer.
that's correct.
Okay, great.
All right, let's refocus. Thank you, Mr. Dillon.
You're welcome.
And hopefully we can have a follow-up update in the form of a calendar invite from somewhere. But that was on to the next.
I choose board Eastern.
Yes,
One with that. All right, next up on the agenda is approval of the opt-out resolution. As you recall, every year the school district is required at this point in time before the official date, before January 29th, to adopt a resolution about its intent, whether or not it is going to increase taxes greater than the Act 1 index. This year, the Act 1 index is 3.5%. So if the school district feels as if it cannot meet its budgetary goals with simply a 3.5% tax increase, then it would need to opt out of the and continue down a separate process, which requires more transparency about a preliminary budget and about the way it's going to spend its money next year. So for the past, since I've been here the past 4 years, we've always approved an opt-out resolution to stay within that Act 1 index, and we'll continue to do so this year with the added caveat that in order to receive the tax equity money from the state, we also have to pass this opt-out resolution and keep our taxes within the Act 1 index. So this is the resolution itself. On this slide, I will read it to you. You'll have the opportunity to read it for the board meeting. And again, this is the repeated slide. This is the entire Act 1 timeline. And we are right here. We are ready to approve our opt-out resolution for the Act 1 index in December. We actually have until January this year, but just doing it earlier, keeping within this December. And in February, we will present our preliminary budget. So even though we aren't necessarily required to be as transparent, because we are opting out of the Act 1 index, we'll still be early with our preliminary budget.
Any board questions or comments?
Oh, I got multiple Act 1 slides.
Oh, that one. Nice.
How does it get calculated? Blame the MDPI.
Again,
So repeating this Act 1 opt-out resolution slide, but I really wanted to jump back into this regular tax equity grant resolution for the cast. So that tax equity money, the regular and block grant, was required to be used for these purposes. And as you recall, the school board adopted a resolution saying it would use it for any one of these purposes, but primarily it's for preventing an increase in the millage rate in the school district. But honestly, we could use it for mitigating or replacing the loss of revenue received, because we have a lot of tax assessments coming through. So there's really multiple ways. That is my conclusion. That's the way I feel.
To clarify, we passed that resolution, but will we need to pass another like an
I think it's an annual.
annual resolution?
We'll see what the guidance is first.
Thanks. Now I will say, are there any board questions or comments?
All right, so now the next board action item for approval are the bid results for Cedar Brook and Glenside. So we're looking at the Cedar Brook addition, which seems more of an obvious project. We're trying to get our sixth graders into Cedar Brook to make it a 6 to 8 middle school to precipitate the closure of the Elkins Park Elementary School. But just want to take a minute to revisit the Glenside Elementary School addition project and the factors as part of our strategic plan that led to the necessity for this project, and now revisiting that plan 3 years later where we're at. So the Glenside Elementary School project is to add 6 classrooms or a capacity for additional 150 students. If you recall, at the time we were considering that project, we had done an enrollment study with the Montgomery County. We had done a capacity study, and we had done a facility assessment study as part of our feasibility study for all of our school district properties. And back when we did that study, based on the enrollment growth predicted by the county, by the trends we were seeing internally, by our school building size, it was estimated that after we were done building our addition onto Cedar Brook and moving 6th grade into Cedar Brook and moving 5th grade back in our elementary schools, we were going to have an issue because Glenside Elementary was going to be 95% capacity with perceived growth. And this was based on enrollment that's now 3 years old at this point. Over the past 2 years, we have had extraordinarily low classroom sizes. The one thing that the Montgomery County enrollment study pointed out was that birth rates are down across the entire Philadelphia region, and every school district is experiencing a drop in elementary school students. When we had a very low kindergarten class last October 1st, when we did our assessment for PDE, the question was, is this a one-time anomaly or is this a trend? So, obviously 1 point of data is just simply that, 1 point of data. Now we're on year 2 and we have another small kindergarten class. The trend is starting to develop. So the past 2 years, we've had an incoming kindergarten class of roughly 240 students across all our elementary schools. In the past, that number is usually over 300 or closer to 300. So if I look at this chart this was used as part of our feasibility study and part of our strategic plan, we were anticipating 501 students at Glenside Elementary. If I take a quick snapshot of where we're at with Glenside Elementary, we're at 400. 38 students this year with fifth grade integrated back into Glenside Elementary. So the other estimates are a little closer, but this 438 puts us right around 85%, which is our target capacity goal for Glenside. So given that, does that mean that we need to spend $6.8 million on the addition of Glenside? So there are certain factors here to weigh. Do we want the additional capacity? Do we have additional programming that we can run through that building that we need the space for, that we can reallocate students from other buildings? And then the flip side is, do we want to incur the cost? $6.8 million for 6 classrooms. It seems like a little bit of a hefty sum. There is the budget impact we talked about, which is additional $500,000 annually to our debt service to pay for the $6.8 million cost for the project. So as this is, as we come into the next legislative meeting next week, I wanted to throw this out there as a consideration. And get whatever feedback I can before making a recommendation.
Any more questions? Let's see.
I'm wondering if we, and by we don't really mean we, but if admin, if anybody has talked with Glenside leadership, with Glenside teachers to see how it feels in the building currently.
Yeah. Can I come over to the
Let's see.
We're saying things. Just happened to be here tonight. I actually have spoken with Dr. Robinson and her team, and they have made every nook and cranny of the building work. I think what we have to really examine and think about is the class size mechanism, because in certain grades, we have multiple sections with smaller classes than are, dictated by board policy, and in some circumstances by quite a bit. So when you look longer term at Glenside and what this looks like, particularly as this larger fifth grade bubble that we have kind of graduates out into Cedarwood, I think we will see a continued shift in, well, honestly, a downward trend, unless we see an increase in the kindergarten class size. But we have been plotting for and having 3 kindergarten classes every year regardless, which is why we have some of the smaller class sizes.
What is the class size?
At this point, we actually are pulling everything today, but in kindergarten at Glenside this year, we were seeing between 18 and 19. There's other classes in other buildings that are as low as 16. And that's not just kindergarten, I'm talking all the way up.
Yeah.
With the closure of Elkins Park School and the redistribution of teachers, that also ate up some square footage in terms of classroom space, but also gave us the capacity to add additional sections in some places or maintain, smaller class sizes because we had the teachers to actually staff into the buildings. Cheltenham Elementary School is a perfect example because we actually have 5 sections of fifth grade there. They just had an incredibly large bubble and we had the teachers. So it was easy to just transfer fifth grade teachers there. And they also had the classroom space. So as we are, managing this year over year, I think each building feels a little different because we have so many ebbs and flows in terms of the number of students that are at each grade level. There's no consistency.
Dr. White?
If we approve the bid in the next meeting, does that lock us into a contract and set us on a path towards building this?
Yes.
So now is the time for deliberation about whether we want to do this.
Can I ask a clarifying question in that lens? So we have Dr. Whiting's question / point. Next week, this would potentially appear, based on this conversation, on the agenda. You had mentioned previous bids. Were there bids that were being considered that relied on one another? You said that that was one possibility, but that not everybody did that. So are the numbers for Cedarburg project contingent on the approval of this bid? or are they fully decoupled?
The numbers for Cedar Brook are consistent. Glenside Elementary might fluctuate if they did go the other way. If we didn't approve Cedar Brook, we approved Glenside.
Sorry, six.
I said the numbers for Cedar Brook are solid, the ones that were presented. But the Glenside is the one that might change if in the unlikely event that we didn't approve Cedar Brook.
Thank you.
I was wondering a little bit about that enrollment study, and also always wondering how many students we have in the district who are of school age who are not enrolled in district schools. And I just asked that really because, oh gosh, when we had, was it 2008, 2009, something like that, and then a few years afterwards, we had like this great influx all of a sudden of kids coming from private schools because parents could no longer afford to pay. And I don't know. I just always worry a little bit about that. We know we have a lot of kids in this district who go to private schools. Like what if something were to happen again to the economy like that, where all of a sudden like people couldn't afford to send kids to private schools? Would we be able to accommodate those kids? I don't know.
The private school enrollment question to me is always difficult to nail down because that data doesn't get reported to us.
Yeah.
The closest we get to getting that data is through our requesting and through transportation to offer services.
And we did at one point look at the census tract data from the 2020 census, and I remember that we saw that there was almost, I guess, I can't remember the number exactly, but it was between 6,000 and 6,500 kids in township in 2020, but our enrollment in 2020 was significantly lower, so there was a gap there. But because we don't have consistent census data, we can't necessarily predict. But it is definitely one of those questions that we have as well.
So I would recommend, since this is a deliberation moment, please make sure that you're asking questions now that would inform how you feel about this. It doesn't mean you have to make a determination on what you would vote. We can do a straw poll separately to give the administration a sense. Ms. Blitzstein and then Dr. Whiting.
How much have we spent already on the project?
We are we have some unpaid bills, we're about $500,000 in architecture.
Just
So the project could be tabled, and those fees would largely, or those plans would largely remain intact, but just like anything, plans to expire as construction requirements and ADA requirements change.
Dr. Whiting.
Can we present some of this information publicly and possibly create its own agenda items so we can deliberate publicly in the legislature? Because I feel like, spending $7 million, we have all been on the path for spending $7 million on this addition. And we now have data that shows that we may not need to spend $7 million. It would be worth it for us to, I think, take a moment and present to the public in a wider audience, I think, than we might get here, what the considerations are, and then talk about it as a.
Can I ask a related question? Do we have to vote on this next week? Could we vote on the Cedar Brook project next week and then potentially consider this in January or February after there has been a little bit more time for us to process and the public to potentially process?
Let me do the math on how long bidders are required to hold their bid price. I believe it's 60 days, but it could be wrong. So the approval in December was the primary reason for the approval in December is because, as mentioned earlier, that window for getting Cedar Brook done is tight by the fall of 2027. So we're trying to keep that as.
Yes, I think for purposes of the board agenda, you would list it on the board agenda as bifurcated and separate items. And you wouldn't put it on the consent agenda because it's the approval of a lot of money. You would just list it separately, and then if you wanted to do a presentation or something of the sort to go with it before you did a vote, you can list it probably as roll call vote.
Yes, that.
But I think, Mr. Spargo, if we can explore if we can vote on the Glenside piece in January, I think that would be in everyone's best interest to have the time to discuss it and get the information. And I think to hear more, can I ask my question now?
Please.
I couldn't remember for everyone others. And the one question that I would have is, we know how we originally thought we might use these 6 classrooms, and maybe we don't need to use them that way. And I think that we could probably think of lots of wonderful ways we could use that space, from our ed department, different opportunities that we would then have with that extra space. I also want to be cognizant of, or I'm concerned about when we start talking about moving a program to a certain school, because then we're talking about moving kids out of their neighborhood school, which we have worked really hard, I think, to get as many kids in their neighborhood schools as possible. So that's kind of what's going through my mind is what would the rooms be used for, and to kind of hear what the opportunities are. And then also I think, and I almost hesitate to say this out loud, but I think that because, as you just said, Ms. Savage, the difference in school to school and grade to grade is so kind of wildly different, and it's not necessarily always matching up with what the demographic study said, and we don't know what these birth rates are gonna look like. And to Ms. Lowen's point, there's so many factors. I think about the way our lines for our catchments are drawn, and if that is something that, and it could be 5, 6, 7 years. I know that's why I said I hesitate to say it out loud, because it's a really sticky, and I understand that it is, but I think that if we were to make the investment, knowing we didn't need that space right now, I just think it has to be something that we consider if we need to. Last resort and all that. But that's kind of where my brain is going. But I think if we had a little more time to talk about it, to hear about it, and to hear what what the ideas could be with how that space.
And in the Office of Education, we have actually talked a little bit about what those classrooms could be used for, but I think it would need to involve a larger communication and conversation with the Glenside community as well. Because obviously we do have a rising special education population that we need to consider. We have big autistic support classrooms in particular in elementary schools. But I think there is an additional need and a space for us to think about challenge classrooms. Also, in thinking about how we're doing our encore classes in particular, like, is there a space in the world where we look at our STEM classrooms differently? Right now, our STEM classrooms in most of the buildings are in classrooms, right? So as the children are now in this K-5 STEM special and liking it very much, what does that mean for how we're outfitting classrooms? Dr. Walsh?
And I just wanted a point of clarification. You were talking about a public meeting, Ross, about making this a legislative and having public discussion. I just wondered what discussion has been done to date with the Glenside community, were plans rolled out, and where I would think that conversation about a change would probably start with that before a larger discussion about what would be the different options.
Well, much of the conversation that has gone on with the construction projects in general has been held at the board level. But when we actually were working with the architects to sketch out what this would look like, that's when we involved the administration at the building levels and asked them those specific questions around, like, what would you utilize this space for? But when all of that was coming down the pike, we were working on the old enrollment projections.
Right.
So the assumption was these would be classrooms, and that's what we have structured them as.
Right. So any of those meetings involve also parents and teachers in Glenside?
Teacher conversations, absolutely. And when we did the reconfiguration of the school district for K-5, and we actually talked about, like, what it meant for the district, I went on a full tour of all the elementary school buildings, and we actually leaned into and had conversations with PTOs. We talked about the construction project at Glenside in the PTO meetings and also at staff meetings. I remember specifically being at Glenside because the room was very hot. I remember that. There was a lot of people in the room, but answering some of their questions around, the construction timeline with this man, because they had some anxiety around keeping the 5th grade because of the tightness of the space at that point, but currently it has worked.
Yeah.
It has definitely worked. And again, we haven't seen the increases in student population there that we thought we did. We would.
As part of the feasibility study, we had a series of public meetings and public surveys to assess the acceptance of this plan. And the Elkins Park piece was overwhelmingly, that's the direction the community wanted to move. This piece, a little vague. Mostly because we have Cheltenham Elementary and Wyncote Elementary, and they have very clear designs The architect designed that to be K to 5. There's pockets of classrooms that follow each grade. Myers and Glenside were done first, and because of Myers buildings restrictions, it wasn't quite
The
set up that way.
footprint.
But for some reason, Glenside wasn't done with that thought in mind. It wasn't done with that forethought, which also lended itself into this project.
And this, the way the architects have set this up, it would give us those pods. So just, pointing that out as well, because right now, for the most part, we have 3 classes at every grade level. But in some places you have classes that are split and they're not together because there's no pods.
That was unique because 3 elementaries were designed that way.
Right.
Looking inside. 2 at some point incorporate 5th grade.
Any board members who have not yet raised any questions that are on your mind that have not been brought up, also like to share? I will just throw out that for me, it would be very helpful to understand I know what the trade-off is from a fiscal perspective, because it's right in front of me, of doing it versus not doing it. And I'm hearing that it was about mitigating a risk that we have increased confidence won't manifest related to enrollment. And that is part of why we're revisiting the conversation. Less clear to me right now are the other things we would gain from this project, which have just been alluded, one was just alluded to, for example, which is it is valuable to be able to have a pod model that we have in other elementaries at Glenside. So that's really helpful information. So when we're talking about the idea of potentially postponing this vote, I just want to be clear, that's for me, not just for the sake of postponing the vote. One is to get the chance for community input, but truly the other is a chance to give administrations time to help present what would we be getting if we continue on the project. So we're not just making it, oh yeah, $6 million sounds like a lot. Sounds like we don't need it anymore kind of choice. I'd rather it be more deeper than that.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. And I will note that if we did postpone to the legislative meeting in January, that means we could have that conversation in the next, whether it's facilities or financial affairs committee meeting, which I think lends itself to more detailed discussion.
And could we potentially make that public conversation more known
For sure.
to the public?
That's on, it's on us to make sure we
Yeah.
help amplify the meeting. All right. Any other, if not last call in the existential sense, but any other comments on this before we move to the next agenda? Seeing none.
We talked about this, what the approval would look like, whether it's a joint approval or a standalone projects. 2 additional bids to be approved at the board meeting next week is David Blackmore Associates as the materials testing entity. So in essence, what they do is they test the steel that's used and they test the concrete as it's poured and make sure that it was mixed and it was done correctly, which is standard for a large project of this size. Also approval of the bid for a series of track equipment. We needed some additional hurdles. We needed some additional blocks. Our pole vault, our high jump mats were very old, so the bid was to replace them as well. The total bid for all items is $48,000, and that is spread across 3 vendors. Any questions on these 2 bids? Yes.
Is the materials testing for both Cedar Brook and Glenside?
That is correct. Yeah.
And so if we potentially did not do Glenside, that could be cut in some way?
In some way.
In some way. I don't want to say in half, but
Technical term.
okay. Yes, it would decrease, even if we approved it right now at that.
Always love it.
Just thank you for thinking about the track and field equipment. I just seen that stuff up close and it definitely was past prime, so glad to see that we're replacing it.
We have amazing.
And we have an amazing track team that we should be supporting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the last item, as we develop the budget, 70% of what our budget is salaries and benefits. So as we talked about the last meeting, we're always looking for these indicators and how they're going to drive the budget. And so we do have an update. We do have some additional information from the last meeting. And that is, Zachary, as you were asking, that was about our medical increase. So we had a lot of contractual changes that manifested themselves last year. We only had a 1% increase to our medical premiums. This year is not quite the same story. So what's driving this year's medical increase, the 17% increase, is just a bad experience with a bunch of very high claimants. I think every now and then a district takes its turn in that wheel when you have some sick employees that are dependents. There's not a tremendous amount we can do as a self-insured entity with the cost passed through to us. And without naming what these incidents are, because you'll be able to identify the individual. It's somewhat unavoidable. So unfortunately, the 17% increase, if the first look holds into the second look, is approximately $1.7 million increase to the district for medical insurance. So that's how that manifests itself to the budget. The first piece that I worked on calculating last week was what is our staffing costs, and that's if we maintain the same level of staffing across teachers, support staff, administration. So if we maintain that same level of staffing, we're looking at $1.8 million in additional salaries, but I think we can do better than that. I think we can find attritional savings on this piece. By mid-December, we get our pension rate update. We don't have it yet. Right now, it's scheduled to go from 34% to 34.73%, which is roughly a $570,000 increase to the district. We've had some strong economic times still into this year, so hopefully our actuarial valuation brings us back at a hold at 34%. And as you recall, our transportation contract still calls for 4% increases, which is a very good. And last but not least, this is quite the surprise right off the press. The IFO, the Independent Fiscal Office, released future index rate projections. So this year, our base index was 3.5%. Next year, we're looking at an estimated base index of 2.9%, then 3%, then 3.2%, going out to the 29-30 school year. So looking at what our tax increases or max tax increases look like going out the next 4 years, that's the number where we have to hold at. That's where we have to contain ourselves. As a max, we obviously want to do better. And again, the Act 1 index is based on a mix of average wage increases, state level and federal level, which is supposed to approximate CPI. All right, so if we look at this 3.5% tax increase and we assume that the state, we already know there's $1.1 million coming from tax equity. We're looking roughly a little over $4 million. We already have, if we maintain the same level of staffing commitment, we have a $1.8 million increase, a $1.75 million increase for benefits, a $500,000 increase for PSERS. So we're already right there at $4 million. So we're looking at Act 1 and the state increase, and right now projected increases without even factoring in any changes to special ed or anything else that might come down the pike. So in order to make this budget balance, it's going to be necessary for us to take a hard look at staffing and programming to fit within that window.
Thank you for the heads up. Any board questions or comments? One question from just a reminder for me and of course the public. I'm asking, when do the various contracts, when do we re-enter negotiations both for transportation, and also the big, CEA.
So now that the board has reformed, we will have to establish a negotiation committee because our support staff contract expires at the end of this year. And we'll begin meeting in January. Our administrative staff contract also expires at the end of this year. That's obviously not a negotiation, that's a meet and greet. And then our teacher's contract expires at the end of next year, so 2027.
Thank you.
You asked about transportation, isn't it?
I did, but,
There's two more.
it's on the, that was,
I believe it was this year and next year, but there is the opportunity for early renewal sooner, I believe. before the- So it, 4% rate increase, all things considered, is not terrible in the transportation industry and for school districts. So I believe the extension is 5 more years at 3% per year. So it's not a terrible.
and part of why I raised that question in the context of our budget is obviously our contracts drive our expenditures, the vast majority of our expenditures. So those negotiations are the opportunity for our board to essentially determine what constraints we're going to be having for years into the future. So we see what's imposed on us as constraints at the bottom there. And then we see what contracts can translate to in terms of constraints we impose on ourselves. Any, I think that's any other comments.
I don't see any raised hands or comments on Zoom. That's it. That's the last.
Is there a motion? Sure.
Second, Dr. Epps.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you all.